Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Legal Tech Week, the podcast, webinar, whatever we are, where we talk about the week's top stories in legal tech and innovation. It is August 19th, 2022. Several of us on this call are about to head off to exciting National Harbor outside of Washington, D.C. for ILTA, for a live ILTACon there. That's going to be exciting for all of us. I am Bob Ambrogi. I am the moderator, and I write the blog Law Sites and also have the podcast Law Next. Happy to have Jeff Brandt joining us today. Jeff, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jeff Brandt. I am the Chief Information Officer at Jackson Kelly. I am also the editor of the Pinhawk Law Technology Daily Digest.
Which got a really nice redesign. Looks great. I really like it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And Niki Black.
Thanks. I am Niki Black. I am the legal technology evangelist with My Case Law Practice Management Software. I also write legal technology columns for Above the Law, ABA Journal, Daily Record, and also sometimes for the My Case blog. I'm super excited about ILTA this year. First of all, because I haven't been in a while. Second of all, because it's a super surreal experience being in that crazy dome. It's like you feel like the apocalypse has occurred and you're living in this city inside this dome with all these random people. It's really strange. And when it rains, you don't know it's raining. You just hear a little bit of a pitter patter. It's very strange, but it's interesting. So I'm looking forward to that. And also, I'm speaking at a panel. I've never spoken at ILTA before at ILTACon. And My Case and LawPay are both exhibiting for the first time too. So it's kind of a bunch of firsts, and first time I've been there in a couple of years. So it's a first for that too. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys all.
And what's your panel?
It's something Alexa, my time. It's like a time and billing with an AI component. And I can't remember the exact name of the panel. So,
and you've also volunteered to organize a field trip to a local dive bar.
Yes, I have. Because dive bars are my favorite, not enough, but somehow I did indicate an interest in that. I was kidding, but okay. But I'll do it. Oh, I'm up for anything.
Plan my schedule around it. Victor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I am assistant managing editor for the ABA Journal. Yeah, sorry, I spilled something right before we got on the air, so that's why I've been wiping my desk down. So I apologize.
That's okay. All right, well, we'll go on to Steve Embry.
I'm Steve Embry. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Tech Law Crossroads. I'm also a full-time writer for Tech Law Crossroads. I also pay all the bills and clean up after myself when I can.
All right, well, I don't know. It's been kind of a strange week for me. There's been a lot of stuff going on, and I've personally been just saying before we started, finding it just had a really busy week on everything else, other stuff in my life, and haven't been able to cover as much of it as I wanted to cover. And I know a lot of us are prepping to go off to ILTA. Joe Patrice is, I think, on his way there, perhaps right now. And we're all looking forward to being there. But Jeff, do you want to get guest privileges and go first with something that struck your interest this week?
Sure. So thank you for having me again. I wanted to go back over one of your posts, the mixed messages from the ABA, as it reaffirms, and I'll post a link here, non-lawyer ownership and encouraging innovation simultaneously. I look at things like that, and I've, it's been what, 37 years I've worked in legal as an outsider. My degree is computer science and mathematics, but protection of the guild of law is something that continues to amaze me. That when you look at what restrictions we put on American lawyers, U.S. lawyers versus England, Australia, to a certain point, even Canada, the law societies there, I think, are a little more liberal. But it just, I'm not a fan of the ABA. I think a lot of its advice is a decade old, and to ultimately tell me that from a technology perspective, I should be doing my due diligence. Doesn't really help from that perspective. But like I said, I think, ultimately I translate that article as innovation is fine as long as it's done by a lawyer. And I don't think they're going to see we will see innovation from lawyers. I'm not saying that's not the case, but I think we'll see innovation from across the field in a multitude of professional practices that will impact the practice of law, and to try and restrict it to strictly the guild of law, I think is a problem. It really is.
Yeah, well, as it happens, Victor, the story you had put out there this week is kind of related to that. I don't think it talks specifically about the resolution, maybe it did, but about this issue generally of do we want Google practicing law?
Well, I mean, I don't know much about the ABA, so I mean, I don't really. Oh, sorry. No, okay, so I can't go too much into detail about this, but like, pretty much the last few years that I've been there, if there's anything that's going to be guaranteed, like, the second coming of Armageddon at what is otherwise fairly routine House of Delegates or Board of Governors meetings, it's this type of resolution. I think a few years ago there was a resolution that went the other way, where they were like going to encourage, it's going to stop short of endorsing non-lawyer ownership and that kind of stuff, and so that, like, people went nuts over that, and then they had to water it down to the resolution where it was like they'll encourage innovation, and then the same thing this time, where it was like they want, like, some groups wanted to go the other way, but then there was pushback in that sense, and then you kind of see like this kind of like compromise kind of thing, where it's like, okay, well, we want to reiterate that we're against this, but we support this part. So seeing how the sausage gets made kind of ends up satisfying nobody. And I'm sure at some point there'll be at one point, so there'll be a much bigger fight that'll come along that'll kind of resolve it one way or the other. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's one of those things where I think nobody ends up being happy about the resolutions. You have people who think that the article that Stephanie Ward wrote focuses on the efforts in California, but you could easily translate to the whole to what a lot of other states are dealing with, where it's like you have people who are just really suspicious of these tech companies, thinking that all they care about is money, all they care about is making a profit, and so therefore people are going to be screwed because they're not going to get the right kind of representation, because there's something pure, I guess, about taking the profit motive out of it, even though I don't know of any lawyer out there who's ever gone into practice who's going to open up the law firm thinking, oh, I don't care if I lose money as long as I do right by my clients. I mean, you want to end up doing both. So it's one of those things where I think there's a lot of demonization on people assume the worst about people on both sides, and it ends up not being very productive for except maintaining the status quo. And maybe that's the ultimately what people are hoping for, because as long as the status quo remains, you have a few states where it's okay, like a Utah or Arizona, but but if the big states kind of remain on the sidelines, I think maybe some people will take that.
I keep looking back to my. Go ahead, Steve.
I too have to be somewhat careful here, since I am the head of the law practice division of the ABA. But Victor is right. I mean, this is a very hot topic, and people on both sides feel very strongly. That's also true in my division. Although we did not take a position, or were we asked to, on this resolution. But I do want to push back a little bit on something Jeff said. I'm very proud of what the law practice division and the content that we offer up, and at least on the practice management side, I think most of it is cutting edge and not stale, and we make a very concerted effort to make sure that's the case. Of course, we're in a little bit different situation than many of the other substantive sections of the ABA, but in any event, I think we do a pretty good job in being on task and looking at issues that are are important and relevant.
Yeah, I thought it was something else interesting had happened this week. Is that the ABA Center for Innovation? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah, the ABA Center for Innovation put out this innovation trends report. As a matter of fact, I think, as a matter of fact, they put it out during the ABA meeting and annual meeting, and then kind of released it out to the media this week, which is an interesting report that talks about a lot of these cutting edge issues. But the report is, slapped right up at the front of the report is the disclaimer that says the views expressed in this report have not been approved by the House of Delegates or the Board of Governors of the American Bar Association, and accordingly should not be construed as representing the policy of the ABA unless expressly noted therein. And it's, I think it's representative of the fact that while the ABA powers that be ultimately continue to come down on the, as Jeff said, only lawyers can innovate side of this equation, I think there's a lot of conflict within the ABA around that issue, and a lot of debate and probably division. And I don't know. I like to think that it's moving. That someday the aircraft carrier will turn slowly but surely, and the ABA may come around to a more liberal position on this.
I keep
Well,
thinking
of course,
back,
the other piece of it is, the ABA is composed of lawyers I mean, who love to argue about anything, much less something that they feel very strongly about, and will argue as long as they possibly can. I'm sorry, Jeff, I've interrupted you twice, and I won't do it again. I apologize.
That's okay. I just keep thinking back to the work I did with ClearSpire, who I think was truly ahead of their time. And if you gave a ClearSpire more free reign in terms of the differences between ClearSpire, the law firm, and ClearSpire Service Co., the other piece, what could they do today with 2020 technology and free reign to have that non-lawyer ownership piece and component? It's kind of, I don't know that it's quite a 50-50 toss, but I think things might have turned out a little differently than they did originally. But
they were ahead of their time.
It is what it is at this point.
Yeah.
The thing about the ABA that I was, practically speaking, getting at the most basic level here, the ABA is an organization of lawyers from across the country, from all different geographic regions, all different walks of life, all different size law firms, versus when you have a state bar or even a local bar, you're going to have more of a uniformity of opinion because their experiences are more the same in terms of practicing law and profiting or generating revenue from the practices. But because you're bringing all these different people in from all around the country, and because the ABA does tend to be, I would argue, a larger firm influence, you're going to have these disagreements because the powers that be in the ABA do come from these just completely different backgrounds. So their perspectives are going to be very different on whether it is a good idea to allow someone other than lawyers to practice law. And for some of these people, I mean, the bottom line is it comes down to them being concerned about their own financial well-being. So I think the ABA is probably going to be, usually in certain situations, they're absolutely going to lead the change, but I don't know if this is going to be the topic that's going to generate that unanimity.
Yeah, that's right, Niki. I mean, we and we've talked several times about the legal market is composed of lawyers and law firms with business models that couldn't be more different from one another. To the point that it's, we all often sort of think of the law firm marketplace as being this monolithic sort of marketplace composed of a certain kind of lawyer and law firm, and it's just not true. I mean, the contingency fee business model could not be any different than the billable hour business model, and so you have all these different voices and within the ABA, and so that's a very good point. It's hard to herd the cats. Somebody once said it's hard to, lawyers are like herding cats, but that's an insult to the cats, right?
Right.
Joshua Lennon raises a good point too in the in the chat. He said the fact that their dues dependent on lawyers cannot be understated in impacting ABA's disjointed leadership on legal services innovation. And that's also bar associations across the country are struggling with membership, and therefore they want to retain the membership they've got, including the ABA. So that's a great point too. They're going to try to represent the interests of those who are actually paying dues. So
Yeah.
And it also depends on who's the president too, because sometimes, I mean, we've had presidents that have pushed regulatory reform, we have presidents that haven't, and we have presidents that focused on other things like, criminal justice reform or whatnot. So it's just, it also depends, because I mean, a few years ago when, it looked like it was going to be a much more of a push towards relaxing some of the regulations, but now, I think based on some subsequent events, it's probably not going to happen for a little while. So that also depends as well, like the sort of like the internal politics and who's president and who's the president-elect. That matters too.
Can we bring
It's just
back
gonna-
Judy Perry Martinez for another term? That's,
It's just going to take a lot longer to chip away at the definition of what is legal work, lawyer work, versus what is not lawyer work. We've been changing that in the 30 years that I've been involved. We've seen massive changes in that. I think we'll continue to see change. It'd just be nice. I keep seeing stuff that's, this is going to be the tipping point. This is going to be that. And it's a very resilient industry and very resistant to change and those tipping points. So we'll see going forward.
yeah.
And what you just said, Jeffrey, interests me too, because the panel that I'm on, that's about artificial intelligence and how it's, ways it can be used in the practice of law. Part of what technology and artificial intelligence is doing is redefining some parts of practicing law, right? Like they're taking the more mundane aspects and kind of taking it off the plate of lawyers. And for a lot of lawyers, at least incoming associates, for example, those mundane aspects of practicing law were a big part of what they did to like train and learn how to practice law. So it's interesting how the technology is very greatly influencing that definition of what legal work is as well, artificial intelligence in particular.
Sally Gonzalez and I did a presentation years ago at the first ALT conference, and it was all about what is the next generation practice and so on. That was an excellent point raised, Niki, in terms of if you assume the worst case scenario, best case scenario, depending on which side of the argument you're on, that AI takes over and does all this stuff, the mundane stuff, the rote stuff. The question became, as in the groups that we were fostering conversation with, was how do you train people? How do you train lawyers if you go from here you are, a new baby lawyer, and here's the practicing senior lawyers that are giving the constant advice and general counsel stuff, and AI is doing all the stuff in between. Now that's way overgeneralization as to what ultimately is going to happen, but it will continue to chip away. I mean, again, using e-discovery and the AI pieces, TAR and CAR inside e-discovery. I mean, you've got tools that are available for use. You have people that don't want to use them, don't want to understand the use of them. So then you get into things like what New York just announced the whole, well, not just, but security on top of the other
CLA, the
annual
mandatory
CLA,
CLA.
thank you, CLA stuff. So again, it's one of those things where it's self-fulfilling, right? You've got tools that can do more. You have lawyers that don't necessarily want to use those tools. And so we sit and spin the wheel, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the data is, the evidence is overwhelming that lawyers alone will never be able to meet the justice gap, no matter how much money you throw at legal services, no matter how much pro bono lawyers do. It's just never going to happen. And at some point, it just feels like the ABA needs to wake up to the evidence and the facts and respond to it. But not happening now, I guess.
Well, again, too, Bob, as I pointed out last week, it's easy to point fingers at the ABA, but when you look at state bar associations, their track record ain't too good here either. So it is a difficult problem with a lot of different voices.
Yeah, I mean, they're the ones driving it. I mean, I think at my very first ABA annual meeting, right after I joined, like I think I sat in on one of the sessions, and like there was a guy from, I think it was New York, who like got up in front of everybody and was just, it was one of these like panels where like people were talking about innovation and closing justice gap and everything like that. And it was just like, he goes, I'll never forget, he goes, you people talk about the law as if it's a business. It's not a business. It's a service. How dare you? And it's just kind of like, well, okay, so that kind of shows you what the mentality is. This idea of this idea of oh, well, what we do is special, and what we do, can't be put down to dollars and cents. And you can talk about this in relation to technology in general throughout all the entirety of legal practice. This idea of, well, what we do can't be quantified. What we do can't be reduced to like ones and zeros and dollars and cents and blah blah blah. And how dare you try and like replace us or imply that some algorithm can do a better job than what I trained 3 years and spent all this money to be able to do. So I think there's that aspect too. This idea of, well, if lawyers kind of accept that what they do is not special necessarily per se. I mean, 99% of it is just like, rote form work that could easily be, done more efficiently, then, you're never going to get anywhere.
Well, it's interesting how many of the lawyers who are out there talking about the fact that, opposing the idea of paraprofessionals providing any kind of legal services, which have been proposals in a number of states, California, not the least of them. There's a new one in Colorado. Was it Colorado now that has a proposal on paraprofessionals practicing law? But so many of the lawyers who will say, well, these people can't just give services directly to consumers. Well, then as soon as they're done talking, walk down the hall and throw a file on a paralegal's desk and say, here, prepare all the papers for me for this closing that's coming up next week, or prepare the deal for me for this transaction that's coming up next week. Because they know, paralegals are highly skilled legal services providers who probably in a lot of law offices know more than the lawyers about how to handle certain kinds of matters. It's just hypocrisy. Anyway, well, speaking about how lawyers work and get things done, we happen to have more evidence of how that happens this week, thanks to Niki Black. So, Niki?
Well, so one of my projects this year, in my case, I write the legal industry report, and I wrote that last year, and that's like this report that's based on a survey. But then the other thing I've been doing is pulling different categories of data from my case and trying to create useful, actionable, draw conclusions from them that are either interesting or useful for lawyers so that it helps them understand, give them actionable data to help them make business decisions in their practice. And so the first, it's sort of three parts of the, it's a three-part report, if you will. So the first part is the productivity data that I'll talk about today. The second part, which just was published and shared, is how lawyers get paid. And then the third part is going to be how lawyers get clients. But the part that I want to talk about today that I wrote about it above the law is the productivity data that we pulled anonymized data from my case. And there were some really interesting findings in there. One of them is interesting, and it kind of ties into what I'm going to be talking about at ILTACON on that AI panel that has some billing focus, is the passive time tracking. My case has a passive time tracking tool built into it, which means that anytime the lawyer is working in my case, any time that they don't actually enter and capture themselves, this tool will be running in the background. At the end of the day, you can go over to the Smart Time Finder page, and it'll let you know all the stuff you've been doing in my case, and the cases you've been working on that hasn't been tracked. And then you can, click a button and pull that over into the invoice, capture that time. And there's standalone time trackers. There's time trackers built into our software. Our competitors have it. Sometimes it's built into legal billing software. I wrote an ABA journal article on time tracking tools and included all those different categories. And one of the coolest things about pulling that Smart Time Finder data was it actually shows how in 1 year, the My Case customers, 25% of them that actually use Smart Time Finder, in 2021, they recorded 186,000 additional billable hours that were captured by that, which is 25 extra billable hours per lawyer per year. And then if you assume a 350 billing rate. I just put it really low. That's billable time worth 65 million was captured with that tool overall, which is about 8,600 invoiced per lawyer captured by the smart time tracking tool. And that's not, it's nothing to frown at, right? Like that time captured, they're more than paid for my case, and so if you use that passive time tracking functionality, it can save a ton of time. And just as an aside, one of the panelists at the ILTACon is the CEO of Ping, and Ping takes it like a step further, and they provide context with AI to the billable time capture. So it's just interesting to see how technology can actually help lawyers that do billable hour capture all this time. And then some other really interesting findings that were really they're more interesting than anything else. But I took a look at how different practitioners use different features. And it was really interesting to see how different practice areas, lawyers practicing them, use these features. And but it also, a lot of it wasn't super surprising, but it was interesting. So if you look at like text messages sent from the MyCase platform, family law and criminal law attorneys did that way more often than anyone else, but that's because they're constantly talking to their clients, right? They constantly have court dates and things that they need to discuss versus, a personal injury case will drag on for years. And, you have like, conversation, sort of bursts of conversation when things happen, but you're not constantly sending these messages back and forth. And then trusts and estates, for example, they only had 9 text messages sent. And I believe that this was per case. It was per case within a given year. And that's because, it's a transactional practice. And then some other things, secure client portals, matrimonial won the day with 23 per case. Family law was 19, trust and estates 10, real estate 8. And then some other interesting ones were collaboration features. So the number of documents created per case, family law kicked everyone's butt with 31, matrimonial, really a subsection of family law in its own way, sort of the same category, practice area at least, 27, and then traffic only 6, which makes sense. A lot of these make sense, but they're just interesting to see. And then the number of documents shared, which is interesting because it's that collaboration functionality where the lawyers are sharing documents with either their clients or an expert or a co-counsel. And matrimonial, again, came in super high at 24. And I think that might probably be on the client side because I know some matrimonial attorneys and their clients provide them with all sorts of information and documents and data. So I imagine the clients are sending a lot of stuff to their lawyers in that case. Family law 20, and then real estate came in at 7. So it's just interesting to see that. I thought that data was just super interesting to see how these different features were so useful in certain practice areas, but not in others. And a lot of that had to do with whether they were litigation or transactional. But I really have enjoyed pulling this data and crunching it and coming up with interesting findings. And there was some really interesting stuff in the getting paid. And once I write about that, I'll talk about that as well. But, not surprisingly, there was some really interesting data on how lawyers who accept credit cards or payment plans end up collecting more over time, which makes sense because when you're talking about a client-centric practice and giving your client all these different ways of paying, at the end of the day, you're going to end up making it easier for them to pay because a lot of times when people are hiring lawyers, they weren't expecting to hire the lawyer. So it's not like they've been saving up. They get arrested, they suddenly decide to get divorced, or there's like a tax issue that arises, whatever the case may be. So it's interesting to also see that. So it's been really interesting pulling this data, working with the engineering team, getting them to pull it and then analyzing it and then having to do the math, which I dislike immensely. But this is why we all went to law school. So that part I don't like at all, but and then writing about it. So it was.
I had a kind of a question, Niki, about that. The time capture feature. I mean, and I've heard kind of similar statistics before, and it just strikes me as rather odd that a business built on the billable hour, so many lawyers seem to leave so much billable time on the table because they don't capture it. And I wonder, do you have any sense of sort of what type of things are being captured by the automated system that lawyers were missing? Is it phone calls or conversations, or I'm just kind of curious if you have any thoughts about that.
That's a really good question. It's very interesting. My data didn't go that granular, but I can tell you that the data pool, I didn't have it be that granular, but it only captures our software. There is some software that will capture everything you do on your desktop, for example, whether you're in a certain platform or not. The My Case Smart Time Finder only captures work done within the platform. So you can't make phone calls out of My Case. You can log phone calls, but I really, it's I'm not sure if Smart Time Finder captures that. But I think it probably doesn't, because if you're logging a phone call, you're already capturing it in a way. You know what I mean? But so it would capture emails. You can send emails out of My Case, or text messages, or it's any functionality that, or sending messages to somebody. So you send someone a quick message or whatever the case may be. So it's going to cover the work that you're doing within our platform. In our case, you know, like I said, there's others that'll cover everything that you're doing out just in general on your desktop. So it is a little, and I would suggest that if you looked at one of those other companies that pulled data, that did everything on the computer, they probably ended up capturing even more, because lawyers don't, ideally their practice management is their home base, and that's our dream, right? But they use other software as well. So I bet they would probably capture more, but there's a pretty significant amount captured within our software. But unfortunately, I didn't go quite that granular, but I can tell you it's probably not phone calls.
Yeah, I would guess it's probably like emails and text messages, and
Mhm.
lawyers are busy
Exactly.
and they reply to an email and they think
Yeah.
in their mind, oh, I'll write that down, and when I get to it, and they don't ever get to it, and they forget that those
Well,
point ones can add up to
right.
a lot of money eventually.
And I think it's
Right.
something like that. And it may also, because we have multiple timers that can be running. So they're already like tracking multiple things probably. So it's got to be something kind of unexpected that happened that they felt like they had to deal with quickly. Which is, for me, it often was in the old days when I was just tracking on paper, conversation. Somebody would come in and then I'd talk to them for a while and I'd forget to record that conversation, or a phone call would come in. So it's got to definitely be sort of those one-offs that probably are just 0.1s or 0.2s. But like you said, they add up, especially if you just capture a few of those a day and then you multiply that out over the year. And that's where you're getting these, significant times amount of revenue coming in from this time that was captured that otherwise would have been lost.
Yeah, there's a couple of others out there. There's that time by ping. There's Zero. A couple of other products that are these sort of passive time captures. And I think with Zero, kind of its brilliance when it first started out was it's capturing all the stuff you do on your mobile phone. And I think that's probably accounts for a lot of failure of time tracking. You just quickly, you're just sitting somewhere and you quickly swipe through a couple of emails and maybe type off a quick answer to one of them or something, and you're just not even going to bother to record that time. And like you said, Steve, all those little 0.1s can end of the day add up, especially if sitting in a courthouse waiting for a hearing to start and just sitting there playing on your phone doing stuff.
Yeah, and you have to remember that recording the time, those kinds of entries, that takes time too, that you could otherwise. So you don't do it because you think, oh, I'm not going to record that because I've got to do something else I'm billing for. So yeah, it is a funny situation in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It also becomes, I think, a point of the 0.1s are when you're trying to do it at the end of the day. It becomes 0.2 when you're trying to do it the next day. It becomes 0.5 and 0.6 when you're trying to do it 2 weeks out. I mean, Intap has their time platform integrates into dozens of things. I was trying to quickly pull it up here and I don't see it on their website, but I think there's like 30 different integration points. So to Niki's point, if you want to spend the time and money and effort, you can integrate into literally anything to find that time, that lost time. But there was a PW study 30 years ago, 40 years ago about velocity of time entry. And the fact that if you wait a week, if you wait the month, the amount of lost time is insane.
Yeah.
I remember.
Go ahead, Victor.
Well, I remember what was that company that everyone was crazy about? Was it Tally, or was it, I think you wrote about them a lot.
Tally,
Just idea
Alexa.
of, just have Alexa track it because they track everything else you do, right? But ultimately they went, I think they won the Startup Alley at Tech Show that year, and like everyone, we wrote about them, but I think some of those is where it's like the reason why they weren't able to find a
And
market
they're
for
out
the
of
product
business
is
now.
just yeah, they're out of business now. But like, just like, yeah, I mean, I think the idea of like, you know, using a passive time tracker is just so foreign to a lot of lawyers that it's just not something that they're gonna, you know, spend money on to do, and then they're not gonna, you know, get much use out of it. So I don't know. I mean, you know, lawyers always complain about it, right? They complain, oh, I hate tracking. I hate having to bill time. I hate having to track, you know, my hours. I hate having to do this. And then, you know, all these studies come out saying, oh, look at all the time you lose by not doing this. But then they're not willing to like learn a new technology that would fix the problem. So it ends up being kind of like a chasing your tail kind of thing. But you know, you can say that a lot about the law, right?
Yeah, I was on a panel yesterday, or a webinar yesterday, talking about how lawyers can get paid better and more easily or something. But you know, the kind of the point of that was just that it's so important that you know, communicate with your clients. It's so important that you have processes established around your billing and invoicing and timekeeping and all of that. It's important that you have, you know, schedules in terms of getting your invoices out and following up, and that you're recording your time. It just kind of underscored in my mind how dramatically technology has changed sort of these very simple functions in law practice, and how we kind of overlook the I mean, the real core value of all these practice management programs out there is that they just make it so easy to do this stuff that used to be kind of a tedious thing to have to do. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we were keeping time on paper slips and, you know, writing down little descriptions and you know, you lose all sorts of time when you had to do it that way, because who wants to sit there all the time writing that stuff down? You know, it just underscores really why every lawyer should have a practice management system, and there are a lot of lawyers who still don't. But it's not just something they should do because everybody else is doing it. It really can dramatically change their practice and their efficiency and their ability to get paid and get things done and everything else.
Let's talk about that a little more. No, I'm totally kidding.
I think it's, you know, it's kind of the height of irony that you have lawyers that are resisting things like the passive timekeeping system, and that their clients, particularly insurance companies, have all these very sophisticated programs to mark off inappropriate time that appears on the bill. So, you know, perhaps if we were all a little more open to systems that capture more time, our bills wouldn't be reduced by so much.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we can move on to something. I mean, there are various kind of company stories in the news this week. I thought I would highlight is the NetDocuments announcement of its launch of this PatternBuilder document automation tool. NetDocs had acquired this company Afterpattern, which was a pretty cool you know, sort of no code tool for document automation and building workflows around documents and that sort of thing. And at the time they acquired it, they said, you know, this is an opportunity for us to integrate this right into our NetDocuments platform. Sure enough, that's what they've done. They've created a sort of a new product that it's really just Afterpattern, but now natively, working directly within the NetDocuments document management platform. So, I mean, it just makes a lot of sense from talk about workflow and productivity to be able to build these different kinds of automations and bots directly into NetDocuments, because then everything that you're you're able to draw off stuff that's already in NetDocuments, and then B, you're able to just put this right into workspaces or client folders or whatever. I haven't actually used it. I've seen a demo of it, as I think several of us on this call probably have at this point. It also, you just get the benefits of being in the NetDocuments platform, apart from the sort of direct document related ones, just that, you know, NetDocuments is a highly secure cloud-based program, fairly ubiquitous at this point, not quite ubiquitous, but in wide adoption in the legal industry. So I thought it was a pretty cool move on their part. I'm glad to see it. So, anybody else had any thoughts on that?
I'm connecting with them at Ilticon, so I'll learn more about it then. I haven't had much time to think about it yet.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Steve, were you on that
Same
call?
here.
They did a demo of it a couple of weeks ago, and I forget.
I was not, but I saw your
Oh, you
piece
weren't?
on it. It's pretty interesting.
Right. Yeah. All right, and then I think it's just one other thing I was just kind of mentioned again, not dramatically exciting, but the Lexus Nexus launch of its new legal research service for Canada. We sometimes have a few Canadian listeners on this show, and Lexis Nexus, of course, a couple of years ago launched its Lexis Plus, its so-called premium legal research service, and this sort of their high end, the one that kind of had all the bells and whistles that you'd want to have in a modern legal research service. And they earlier this year rolled out a UK version of it, and now they've put out a Canada version of it. And again, I like Lexis Plus as it stands, and this looks like a pretty cool one. One interesting feature of this Canadian service is that because it's Canada, everything has to be in both French and English. So it is a bilingual legal research service. Not everything is in French, I guess, but just about most all of the UI and all of that is in both English and French, and they are in the process of converting documents so that all the documents will be. Some of them already are, but eventually they want to make all the documents available in both English and French. So that was also pretty cool. And then also Lexis has been talking about more of these APIs it's been putting out there, and there's a sort of Canadian legal research versions of the same APIs that they've been talking about lately. So again, that was it.
I think the French aspect is interesting because you got to make sure that it's pretty accurate translation. And I could envision like a situation where one word is incorrectly translated. This happens with contracts, right? And all of a sudden it has a completely different meaning, and somebody's case, hangs on that particular phrase or something. I wonder if there's ever been any. I'm sure there's been case law translated into other languages. I wonder if there's ever been litigation surrounding that, or if that could actually feasibly lead to litigation. But,
Or
Good
whether
question.
your original materials are duly noted as, French original, English original, or so that you can potentially warn yourself on things like that. Interesting query, Niki.
Yeah, and actually, and maybe
I
this is
forgot
for the,
Joshua Lennon is from Canada.
yeah,
Yes, of
I was
course.
gonna, maybe this is for the peanut gallery for Josh or like someone from Canada. But like, I was just curious. I honestly have no idea. Like, is Lexus as big up there? Like, are they like one of the leaders up there, like the way they are here, or are they kind of? I was just curious, like what their market share is up there, like as far as compared to this country. Like, are they about the same as far as how big they are, or are they it's like pretty like a lot smaller than other companies? Like, is it like a Lexus Westlaw kind of situation up there as well? Like, I honestly have no idea.
I don't know what their market share is up there either, to tell you the truth. I don't know the answer to that. We can wait for Josh to tell us the answer as our official representative of Canada on the
Canadian rep.
Canadian rep. I don't know that. That's an interesting question.
Are we going to require Joshua to print in the chat both English and French versions of his answer?
Well, he said 1/3 to Lexus, 1/3 to Westlaw, and 1/3 to Canley. So, okay. Oh, interesting. All right.
Not too different then.
No.
Yeah, sounds like Cleo should get into legal research up there. All right. Well, anything? I mean, I guess we could also mention. I mean, what would be a week passing without Latera acquiring somebody. So that happened
Right.
this time. Micron Systems. I don't know. Anybody have any comments or thoughts on that? It's like
Would it be interesting to see if the people management, the people resource pieces, because Adoran, of course, acquired VI Global not too long ago before that. So is there going to be an all-out resource war, people resource war in terms of software? It'd be interesting to see what each one of them does.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
the systems alone, when there's an acquisition, having been through a few on my end, it's unbelievable. Just the systems running the businesses, trying to, get everybody on the same systems. Takes a lot of time and effort, a lot of people in the background that are working super hard on that. And it's key to, moving forward.
right.
So,
Doing
I don't
those
know how they're doing
acquisitions
that.
they consume a lot of resources. One acquisition consumes a lot of resources within a company, and going through them at the pace that they've been going through, you really got to
Yeah.
wonder how they're doing that.
Having been through a couple of law firm mergers, it's even worse when there are law firms involved.
Right. Because what, lawyer egos get in the way of everything.
Well, no, actually, in a law firm merger, it's only an issue if it's a merger of equals. If it's not a merger of
that's a
equals,
good
then
point.
it's actually pretty simple. The bigger
Right.
firm wins. So
That's a good point. You're right. You're right about that, Jeff.
All right. Anything we should be looking forward to at ILTA next week? We got
No, but I do
Niki speaking. Yeah. Oh, you got something else, Steve?
Yeah, I do have something. I
You
wasn't
kept telling
sure I
me you
was
had
going to.
nothing today.
Well, I always have nothing. But
No, you don't always have.
as the non-leading legal tech journalist on the panel. But I did notice this past week there was a bit of a debate, and I can't remember whether it was law.com commentators or Bloomberg, but it was noted that with the slowdown in the mergers and acquisitions, and to some extent the lending and commercial sections, that the growth, the profit growth and revenue growth at a lot of the big law firms is or may soon be down, and that would be compounded by the additional expenses that were incurred to acquire talent to service all that work. The corresponding view, and it may have been Roy Story or someone that said, well, that's all true, but never underestimate the ability of big law firms to raise their rates whenever they feel like it. So they may, at the end of the day, may end up okay for the year and for next year too, just won't be the complete boom that it was perhaps the past year or two. So in any event, I thought that was kind of interesting to see where that might play out. And I didn't pick up on it a whole lot, but I did see the conflicting views as to where it all might be going.
Well, that reminds me of the other economy-related story this week that happened earlier this week. Was actually, I think it happened a week ago today. Was CS Disco stock plummeting? Which is interesting in part because it's just one of the few legal tech companies that have gone public. And it just dropped by more than half last Friday, and in their earnings report, I mean, they basically said, this is kind of the nature of the business we're in when you're doing large scale e-discovery reviews. Sometimes you're busy and sometimes you're not. And we weren't as busy recently. Whether that entirely explains it or not, I don't know. But I mean, it certainly makes a degree of sense. Whether that suggests it's not necessarily a great company to be a publicly traded company, that may also be something to think about. But that was interesting. And they'll be at ILTA.
Yeah, I thought e-discovery went mainstream after after Alex Jones and then Trump with his documents. I thought that they would have a boon as a result of that, but I guess not.
Yeah. Well, they were. It might take, maybe that'll drive them up next quarter. We'll see how it goes.
Well, it takes time to buy and choose software, right? You got to read columns like mine. No, but and the larger the company and the firms, the large firms are the ones that tend to use e-discovery, and their buying process is not a short one, right? They have to, takes a couple cycles, and they usually will buy at a certain time. So
Right. Well, I mean, in
went-
their cases cycle, I mean, they may well be regular customers of Disco, but you know, they may have cases that are highly active for the next 6 months, and then nothing going on for the next year after that. So you just don't know.
Yeah,
Well,
plus like the
you
buying
also have-
cycle. Go
You
on.
also have client input where, the client has to deal with the discovery vendor. And so, the law firm ends up as the general contractor, if you will, and it's not necessarily your contract, it's your client's contract that you're using.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think with like the
Yeah.
larger firms, it always feels to me like, when there's like a blackout and then 9 months later babies are born. I feel like when an event like this makes people want to buy software, especially the larger the firm is, you're not going to see that the result of the impetus that made them want to buy it until like, a certain time down the road, versus smaller firms are a lot more nimble. And so when the pandemic hits, for example, it's a lot easier for them to, invest in software and get going with it than larger firms. So
Yeah.
maybe Disco months from now
and,
will have a baby. I don't know.
To Disco's point, I don't know if they're right or not, but we did have a substantial slowdown in litigation during the COVID period, and now it's that the pig and the snake is being pushed through with lots of courts trying to set trials and resolve cases, and so my sense was that a lot of the discovery went forward during that period. So it's hard to say.
All right. Well, we will see all of you, but Victor, I think, at in DC next week. I look forward to seeing you all. And Jeff will be the guy hobbling around with a big boot on his foot.
I
hope
may
you feel
rent an
better.
electric scooter, so I might be the guy zooming by you.
You probably will be in any event, but zooming by me. But great. Look forward to seeing you, and I hope to see a lot of our listeners there as well. And I guess we'll be back here next week, and we can do our kind of post-mortem on ILTA at that point and talk about it. So see you all then. Thanks for watching, and see you next week.
Have a good weekend all.
Take care, everybody.